dive onto the internet for just 10 seconds, and most of the younger people who are watching, whether it be TikTok or some kind of social media, is going to run into somebody who's going to yell and scream that the Bible endorses slavery. You all heard that one before? You will. Does the Bible endorse slavery? Is that what's going on here? Well, again, what I want to point out is God desires his people to know what is right in their time and their circumstances. And I don't believe the Bible endorses slavery. I believe it acknowledges its existence and works within that culture to bring about justice. And so what we are going to see is something really important, because in the 1800s, yes, indeed, there were pastors who stood in their pulpits and they preached that the Bible endorsed slavery and told you how to have slaves and how to have them right and all this kind of stuff. And you know what? We dive into this book and we're going to make a mistake if we are not careful about the difference between the Bible's time and circumstances and our time and circumstances. Because what I'm seeing on the internet is people are making the same exact mistake the people in those preachers in the 1800s made. They're importing their understanding from their time and their circumstances into the text. When you and I read the scriptures, I'm going to reiterate this because this is what I'm trying to do, what I try to teach from the pulpit, and what we try to do all the time. Number one is that we read the scriptures in context God put them in, not in your context. You need to read the scriptures. God chose the day. He chose the time in which he revealed himself. He chose the culture in which he revealed himself, and that wasn't the American culture. And so we need to critically look at this text, because it really hurts to believe that somehow God would endorse what happened in America and the atrocity of slavery that it was, and think that the Bible somehow supported that. And so I'm going to do this. We're going to, for a little bit, take a little bit of a course correction, a class, if you would, before we dive into the application of what I think the text is yelling about. And then here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to look at American context of slavery, and then we'll look at Israelite context of slavery. And it begins right this. In the American context of slavery, black men and women and their children were considered property. But slavery, in the Israelite context, is a lot of things, but it's not that. You say, what? Check this out. Verse 1, if you are there on chapter 21, now that hopefully I've got your interest, you're like, oh, what are we going to get into? Here we go. Verse 1 says, now these are the rules that you shall set before them. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and the seventh he will go out free for nothing. And you go like, well, there it is, Greg. There's slavery. Boom, buy a Hebrew slave, period, boom, end of, no. Don't import our context into their context. The words here matter. Those are English words, but the Bible was written in Hebrew. The Hebrew term for a slave is the word ebed. It means, in basic, can be translated worker, laborer, employee, slave, yes, it has that connotation, servant. It is such a broad term, you need the context to tell you in what way they are speaking about this concept of a laborer. And so you go, well, it tells you this laborer is being bought. That is an imported word from American context. Because when you think buy, don't you see suddenly slave auctions and people being sold in all these locations? Yes, there were those cases in the ancient world, but this is not that word. This word means to acquire. It means it often had a contractual detail to it, because in the ancient world, the vast majority of slavery was done when you personally sold yourself into slavery. What? Yeah, later we're already going to see kidnapping, no bueno, no good. You're not going to go there. Kidnapping is outlawed. So this isn't about running into some other nation, grabbing their people and bringing them somewhere else and selling them. No, that is an American context of slavery. The ancient Israel context of slavery wasn't even slavery. I'm going to call it debt laboring. And it's very different. See, what's interesting is you would acquire a person into your area, your fields, and your home. In some cases, you would supply their housing, you would supply their food, you would supply all these things. Some cases, you would give them money, and they would go make sure their house was running, and then they would come to your house and work while their family ran the fields of their house to keep them from becoming impoverished. There were lots of options going on here as it was contractual. Sometimes it looks a lot like our employment. Sometimes it looks like the NFL, where the owners, trade their players around with contracts. They're free. They can do whatever they want. They quit, they can go wherever. But this is within that context. Now, this is different than the American context in which slavery was about making money for the masters. It was about getting them and running their places and making all this money. Slavery was actually intended in the biblical time period, as God puts it here, to keep people from poverty and destitution. Remember, poverty is not the same. You couldn't just go live on the streets in the ancient world. You die. Live there for long enough, an animal's going to find you, or you're going to run out of food, or some kind of element's going to kill you. This is not the same kind of thing. What you are living in is a subsistence reality in which your village, which is likely all of your family, is working hard to grow crops and meat and eat and do stuff and sell a little bit of it off and help each other out here and there. It is an entire network on trying to survive. And so if you're growing up in town, little old Nazareth or whatever you are in some Galilee town or something like that, and you're out there farming away, and say your name's Joel, and poor Joel's out here, and he's working his field, and one day his field's just not doing it. It's not producing enough crops for him alone. For his wife, for his kids, it's just not working. So he moves in with mom and dad, sells his property. Now he has enough money. That runs out because their family's crops aren't doing too hot, and suddenly now he's a burden on his family. Now, Joel notices across the little village that Michael's doing really, really well. He's got a nice house. He's got bumper crops. He's got storage. He's the guy helping everybody out in town. He's your distant cousin, but Michael's doing well. So you decide, you know what? I can't put my family in further poverty here. I'm going to Michael, and you go to Michael and say, Michael, I need to make a contract with you. I don't have any land. I'm a burden on my family. Will you take me in? I will work for you for 6 years. Michael's looking around going like, I've got enough money, I got enough food, sure, come on in. And in essence, now he is, quote, a slave, an ebed, a laborer for debt. Some cases they would give him the money and then they would pay the debt off. In other cases, they would get punished. They'd have to come in and pay their punishment off. But notice something, it can only last how long? 6 years. See, unfortunately, American slavery was for life. Unless your master decided he would let you out. In this case, it was always a debt worker was for 6 years. And this is important. Hammurabi, in his code, which is an ancient Near Eastern code that was written that we've discovered, he said it's only for 3 years. And we're thinking, well, that's ridiculous. That's better than 6. Why do you have to work for 6? Because there was a difference. When you worked for 3 years, there was maybe enough time to cover your debt, but then you were booted right out the door because I'm not going to supply you a home and food anymore. Bye-bye. But that's not what Israel was about. Israel was about keeping you out of poverty. Keep that in your mind. Constantly keeping you from dying and starvation and bringing a blight and a situation. They were aimed at helping you out. And so when you left, according to the book of Deuteronomy, this is the rules. When you let him, this servant, this ebed, go free from you, you shall not let him go empty-handed. You shall furnish him with liberally. Not a little bit. Not, hey, glad you were in jail. Here's $25. Have a nice day. No. We're worse in some cases than they were. Furnish him liberally, out of your flock, out of your threshing floor, out of your winepress, and the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall give to him. This man works for 6 years. This woman works for 6 years in order to help build up all the crops and everything that's available so that when that money finally came due and 6 years had come up, there was something that he walked away with as well. Because they wanted to keep him from falling into destitution. Reset, restart. The beauty of the system that is found here is not American slavery. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoy the content that you're seeing, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that church bell there at the bottom so that you can get notified when new content appears, when we have a live service that's going on. And if you like the messages and you want to go further, we have a podcast called The Rabbit Trail, in which we pick up things we didn't discuss in the sermon, or we follow the questions of people wherever those rabbits lead us. And so if you're interested in that, down in the description is a link, and you can join us right there.